Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prosperity Through Multifamily Real Estate Investing podcast. So glad you're tuning in with us today. I'm your host, Cody Laughlin, and joining me for the first time together, my co-hosts, John Beatty and Brian Alfaro. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Yes, we got three hosts. That's two co-hosts and a host. It's a trifecta. Yeah,
There we go.
Great today.
Love it.
I feel like we just made it. We're big time now. So,
all right, so guys, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, glad to be here. Glad to be speaking with our very special guest. So, John, who are we speaking with today?
All right, Hemal Badiani. Thanks for being with us today. Great guest. Interesting background. Founder of Exponential Equity, whose focus is kind of against the grain. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and what they do. They're in multiple verticals: office, hotels, multifamily. He'll talk a little bit about the multifamily, but today we're going to go into the against the grain philosophy on kind of what's going on in the markets that's extremely upset going against the grain. Originally in consulting and finance, making the transition to the real estate space and the commercial space, and has over 800 units under management right now. So, Hemal, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely, and I feel super lucky to be having this four-way conversation. So glad to be here.
The more, the merrier, right?
Yep.
Well, man, we're excited to have you here, man. Tell us a little bit more about your background, your story, and how you found yourself in the commercial real estate space.
Yeah, so I grew up in India with a family of business owners and uncles and extended family being in the real estate space. My dad owned factories, so business and entrepreneurship was always kind of in the blood. When I landed here in the U.S. And spent the last couple of decades living in 3 continents. After that, in the consulting realm, helping a lot of Fortune 100 companies, polishing my skills and competencies on scaling businesses, building systems and processes for other companies and C-suites, and then moved into the finance sector. This became just a true calling, right? As I started thinking about where I'm really investing my time and what's really over the next 20 years, what's the goal? So the skills that I'd built over the years in terms of helping other companies, I wanted to utilize them and build my own Fortune 100 business, ideally, and that's kind of the goal. And that's where real estate came to the call.
I love that. That's great, man. And obviously, we all share the same passion for real estate. But what was the kind of defining variable there that kind of led you to start this investing entrepreneurship, if you will?
Yeah, so actually it was one of the more tragic days of my life. There's a saying, you either change because of inspiration or desperation. And I have close to now 5-year-old twins. When my daughter was 1 year old, I was traveling up in Boston. And one of the evenings I got a call from my wife saying my daughter has a skull fracture and she needs to be hospitalized. So obviously extremely scared, worried. Took me a while to fly back from Boston to Charlotte. And really, long story short, my daughter was perfectly fine, no surgery needed, everything healed naturally. But that just changed the entire trajectory of really where I, again, wanted to invest my time. So first thing happened was transferred jobs, no more traveling jobs, joined the financial sector and really started working more remotely, built a team and assistants, etc. And then freed up a lot of time to start learning a new competency. And naturally, I just knew a lot of operators in the real estate space. So started connecting and networking with hotel operators, residential real estate operators, and that's how I started going in the active side of the business.
All right, so you leverage your contacts both in the consulting and on the finance side when you transitioned, and Absolutely. This has kind of naturally grown into that, motivated by the why of yep. your daughter. Yeah, that's awesome.
Exactly.
I tell you, man, as a father, I know John can relate to this as well, man. That kind of hits home. That's something that resonates deep. Being away from your children and dedicating your time to something other than your family. I
Yeah,
know
if
that's
you're consulting, everybody's on the road most of the
yeah,
time. Hotels, it's basically a road show all the time.
Yeah.
So it gets old pretty quick.
yeah, yeah, sure. Well, fortunately, glad to hear that she was okay. Glad to see that it expedited your journey and into the real estate investing world, and led you to be successful now. So tell us, what was your first introduction into commercial real estate? What was your first asset? How you got started there, and
Yeah. Yeah. So since 2018, we started on the residential realm and really started flipping and transacting a lot of houses in the residential realm in the Carolinas. And again, just me being me with my background, really quickly scaled up to a handful of employees, international employees, and really started doing systematic improvements to and created a company. But all in all, it was transactional. So decided to make a move in commercial real estate, really very much focused at the start of 2020. So, when I took a pause, I looked at the arena of commercial real estate, found out that there was just an overwhelming sense of information overload outside. So many Zoom calls, so many network events, etc., happening. So really started looking into a couple of mentors and see where I can narrow down my focus, not trying to attend every conversation that's out there, and invest tens of thousands of dollars along with my time to ensure that I have accelerated and expedited knowledge along with the networking and relationships. So just before COVID hit, those 2 or 3 months were leveraged to attend a lot of events, do a lot of coaching, and then we made our first passive investment this April. So really, really young company from that perspective. But since then, we have enjoyed and been blessed by an incredible momentum in our investments and our strategy and our partnerships.
And what's that strategy look like? How are you forming that? So you're obviously early on in the process, but give
Yeah.
us what's the vision?
Yeah, so our vision is twofold. One, the way to build a $1 billion brand, which is going to be Exponential Equity and the Exponential Group, we recognize that if we do it ourselves, it's going to take several years. So really forming strategic partnerships with complementary operating partners, private equity partners, key principals, lenders, mortgage brokers, et cetera, and built out a consortium across asset classes that we could go to and rely and trust them to bring together a team pretty quickly. So that was one part. And then in parallel, look at something we call the against the grain philosophy that we have, which is essentially, looking at assets. Everybody can buy cookie cutter assets, right? Everybody can buy a stabilized multifamily opportunity, bid against 40 people, put the highest money down payment and the highest purchase price. Our philosophy is, when the music stops, you can get really burnt by that. So we look at different asset classes in different way, different markets in different ways. So for example, not just targeting the top 10 hyper growth markets. Are there other secondary or tertiary markets that might not be growing as quickly, but are stable or slightly growing, but still people want to live in great communities there? Why don't we buy assets there? Is one philosophy. The second one is look at distressed assets, not just rely on rent growth all the time. Again, the music can stop at some point. But look at lower occupancy assets, look at buying assets direct to seller, being creative with financing and having seller financed type of assets or notes from seller that carry some part of the deal or have a preferred equity position. And I can go into many of these details if you need to, if your viewers like that. but essentially creating a framework that allows us to buy something that most people might not be looking at and buy it at a value add proposition and purchase price that allows us to grow at a scale that we are growing at right now.
Sure. That's great. So I think for the show, let's start at the top of that funnel.
Yeah.
You know, how are you identifying opportunities and how are you kind of filtering that down? And then what do your teams look like once you've brought that down into the pipeline? And
Yeah, so I have again through building businesses has been my core, and that's my biggest competency. So for our business, we quickly built up an acquisitions team of people who've had decades of experience in the real estate world, and through that, just in multifamily, we look at probably 50 to 60 deals every month from an underwriting standpoint. And out of that 50 to 60 deals every month, we probably put offers on one or two deals and see where we can go from an acceptance standpoint and try and close one deal every 60 to 90 days. That's kind of the core philosophy. That's the funnel we created by just allowing the people who are our partners to build those relationships and bring those deals to the table.
if you wouldn't mind going into a little bit more detail on that,
Sure.
are these partners are these what are they doing? Are they just, you know, are they in a certain market and they just know the market and they're coming to you? Are
No,
they
so
direct mailing or calling or texting,
yeah.
or what's the role?
Yeah, that's actual details there. So we have three partners on the acquisition scheme. So they, for every deal we close, if it comes through them, they get an equity stake in that partnership of the deal. One part or two partners are looking at the inbound channels. So they, over their decades of experience with brokers and conversations they've had with private equity firms, smaller family offices who might be looking at other asset classes, we just have an inflow of off-market conversations and opportunities that they underwrite and bring to the table. And then we have one partner who is doing the more conventional outbound, we just cold call and look at building the relationship and rapport with potential sellers. And they might not be looking to sell right now, 6 months from now. Before they look to sell, we try and build relationship, see if they don't want to keep it going to a broker, not pay the broker fees, and we try and buy it at a more creative option at a distressed price.
All right, so you got some direct marketing, you got some existing inbound relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you're kind of hitting it from all angles.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I want to go back and bring up a point, Hemal, that I think is important for maybe we have some listeners tuning in for the first time to the show, and maybe they're newer on their commercial real estate investing journey. But you know, you started leveraging the relationships of those who are experienced, right? You started building your team with people that were experiencing, leveraging that expertise in building your business, right? And we hear that so often where one of the best ways to get started in this versus trying to do everything on your own is go find those successful people in the industry, network with those people, you know, ride their coattails, leverage their experience, add value to them and partner with them. And it's a fantastic way to get yourself going, right? Get that momentum and track record, which obviously you've done. I mean, again, keep in mind, you said you started your commercial real estate investing in 2020. And then, I mean, look, we talked about this before the show, right? You have 300 units under management now. You have a total of 800 units invested in. You know, you're looking, I think you said you had another 700 under contract right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tremendous amount of growth in such a short period of time. So, you know, again, it just goes to show you the power of just networking and building on the relationship and expertise of others.
Yeah, absolutely. I when you hit the nail right on the head there. I like to be the least smartest person in the room, and people. It's leadership 101. Bring value to the table, and create a vision that people can align to, and values that people can align to, and that's what we're trying to build. Right? We're building a culture in a company that everybody, based on the value they're bringing to the table, are getting wealthy, making an impact to communities, and investing with us their time and effort with the right rewards at the end. And it allows us to then, there's a saying, I would rather have 1% of 100 people's efforts rather than 100% of my own effort. And that's the only way I know of scaling, because I cannot build competency across 20 different skill sets that is necessary without spending 20, 30 years on it.
Sure. Well, you'd never get anywhere, right? I mean, it's just too much work. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just too much to do by yourself. But
And it sounds like that's actually a good cost structure. I mean, it sounds like you've got three partners, so not necessarily getting a salary right now, but it's all equity based, right? So it's performance based. So if they bring a deal, it's like, hey, let's close it. Boom.
Yeah.
Now you've got equity, and here we go.
Yeah, exactly. And it creates an autonomy, right? When it's true partnership, if there's every 6 months as a core group, we come together, at least I look at all my partners and see where we have evolved, right? I might be looking at something different asset class that they might not be looking at, or some partners might not be looking at. So it allows us to step back without just being tied to an investment philosophy for decades to come. So that's again, a flexibility is a big part of this sponsorship structure.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So it sounds like, and you can get in a little bit more detail about this. So are you saying that each one of your equity partners or the partners that you have kind of bringing these deals together, they've got their own philosophy? It's not just a philosophy across the team. It might be multiple philosophies that kind of funnel in as opportunities.
No, so for now they have the philosophy of our team is to
Okay.
build exponential equity as a brand. But tomorrow, let's say as a brand, we believe if if the market is too hot, and against the grain philosophy might be to stop investing or investing in just industrial warehouses as an asset. And so in that instance, we give them the choice, right? And they have the absolute choice to either evolve into a different asset class and still be partners, or continue to look and build their competency, but provide value for some other partners that might not be us.
And I think you used an important word there that we can all relate to right now, especially because of COVID. You
Yeah.
used the word flexibility.
Yes.
So if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about, we mentioned this a little bit before the show, your philosophy on looking at different verticals in the market, maybe things that people might say, oh, I would never touch that right now. Tell us a little bit about your strategy that in that regards.
Yeah, and it's again, it's built into the culture that we're trying to create, and what my background is. I don't like generalizing when it comes to investments. Well, except the stock market, I don't invest in the stock market. But when it comes to real estate investments, there's always, in my mind, there's always good and bad places or markets, and good and bad asset classes that might not be the same for each market. So, for example, industrial buildings right now might not be in somebody's arena, or office buildings, because when you think about office buildings in general with COVID and remote working, might be deeply discounted, or a lot of them might have to go back to the banks in terms of foreclosures. That's a reality of the overall market dynamics if you think about it. But if you look at an office building for call center employees, right? At some point, they just need to be there from a security and risk standpoint. Would you buy that asset? As an example, right? 6 months from now, when the hotel industry is now slowly picking up, there are resorts, there are markets that are still evergreen. Would you buy hotels specific to that if they're still deeply discounted just because the overall hotel industry is taking such a beating, for example? So having multiple tools in your toolkit, in our opinion, in my opinion, allows you to, again, stay flexible and ahead of the curve, and really pivot your strategy every 2 months, every 3 months, and not say yes or no just because you are in one single lane, right? Now, this is not easy because most, for example, mobile home parks, we are not, our self-storage, we'd love to be in those asset classes, but we don't have strategic operational partners yet in those asset classes. So I don't invest my time looking at those opportunities right now until I build a good consortium of partners that I could rely on to actually close and execute on those assets and manage our investors' money with a fiduciary responsibility. So that those are asset classes we're not looking at. But having multiple options is going to be our philosophy going forward.
You know, Hemal, I'm really compelled by your philosophy here, because you mentioned this, and I think Brian alluded to a second ago, the flexibility, number one, the ability to pivot with this going against the grain strategy, right? Because I know most of us in the space right now are running our heads through the wall constantly every day, because we're all chasing the same assets. We're all chasing the stabilized assets. And what are we seeing in the marketplace? It's over competitive.
Yeah.
You know, it's hyperinflated. I mean, valuations are just absolutely insane right now.
Yeah.
So anyway, excuse me. Yeah, you know, so what's happening is again, you know, deal transactions have fallen a significant amount this year, obviously because of COVID. Now things are coming back to market, and I would argue that it's even more competitive now.
Yes.
Versus pre-COVID, right? And
yes.
so if you don't have the ability to pivot or be flexible in your strategy, you know, not to say patience is a bad thing, but you could potentially be sitting on the sideline or missing opportunities where other people may not looking. And I think I've heard this strategy, or excuse me, this philosophy as of late from somebody else who has probably 5,000 plus stores, and he's built his entire portfolio on this very exact same strategy. You know, listen, I want to look at what other people are not, and I want to see if we can make it work. And I just love that, man. It's great. So, but I think with that said, there comes a specific knowledge base and skill set that comes along with that, right? I mean, you know, as you mentioned, these aren't just your cookie cutters where you have a good property management team and you know, you just manage the manager. I mean, there's some tremendous amount of legwork and effort that goes into really turning these distressed assets and stuff around. So any insights into what you're doing to kind of develop those skill sets and continue that?
Yeah, and again, it comes down to systematizing what you want to do, and bringing the right partners, right? We know the track record of our partners. We work with deep value add partners for a high velocity model for the distressed assets, right? Because we know, again, people are chasing the stock market right now. 2 years down the line, it could be Bitcoin, it could be something else, right? So people who are tired of investing for 10 years in real estate, even when they like real estate as a wealth building strategy, which is fantastic, we look at partners that say, hey, can we get capital out in 2 years or less? If that's the case, we go in, don't take any fees. We put in all our work for free, essentially, for a couple of years with our operational partners, systematized with the national brands, and leverage those partnerships and relationships to say, how much can we buy linoleum for? And every place is the same. You know, how do we get it to a scale that allows us to work with these partners? Building all those things was the first prerequisite. Even before we did, from February to September 1st was our first acquisition, and September 25th was our second acquisition. So from February to September, all we have done, even before building our brand, we just built our partnerships, our relationships, and really systematized what we wanted to do and how we would do it.
You know, I've been telling people lately, that's a great point, because I feel like, you know, we three can attest to this on our end, that we've been busier through COVID than prior to, in a different respect, right? Yeah, deal flow ceased there for some time and we weren't evaluating as many opportunities, but we were able to, very much similar to you, systematize and put, you know, different processes in place and really kind of refine our back office, as you will, continue to network. I mean, I think we've done more networking now than
Zoom is 10x to networking.
Yes.
Oh my God, yeah. My eyes hurt sometimes from looking at the computer screen so much. but I mean, we've been able to connect at a higher capacity than we could have before. So, you know, I think if you haven't capitalized on this year in that opportunity, then you really missed out on a really tremendous opportunity to really grow your business. in a very important way. But
Absolutely.
yeah.
2020 has been the best professional year of my life. Let me say that.
Great to hear.
I love that. Well, so what is right now, what is the investment asset type that is kind of your main focus? If there, I know you mentioned that you're looking at many different verticals, but is there one particular that really has your interest right now?
Yeah, multifamily, even though it's uber competitive, um, we we are blessed again and grateful that we are in a very hot market in the Carolinas, right? Charlotte is so strategically positioned at the border of North and South Carolina, allows us to build a vertically integrated firm here and keep on focusing on the Carolinas market from an investment standpoint. So again, going back to our relationships, we've been working with our local brokers here, having a lot of face-to-face conversations now with them to really allow them to understand the level of scale that we're looking for in the Carolinas market and get them excited to be partnering up with our brand. And so you'll see from exponential equity standpoint, a lot of multifamily deals in the Carolinas that we start acquiring over the next 3 to 6 months.
Make sure to call us if you find them. Okay, we'll help you out there. Love that market, man. It's been a hot market for some time now. But
Yeah.
Let's kind of pivot a little bit and talk about, you know, you've obviously been scaling very quickly. You're moving with a tremendous amount of momentum, and I love the fact that you've been implementing systems along the way and putting pieces in place. You know, I think a lot of people kind of, you know, get far ahead of themselves first before kind of putting those processes in place. So kudos to you. It's phenomenal. But what are some of the challenges that you're facing as you're continuing to grow so quickly?
The biggest challenge is making sure we're not just chasing shiny objects, right? When you're looking at multiple asset classes and you have so much of an inflow of deals coming in, for me, I have to keep myself abstracted and really continue to evolve our pre-qualifying process for the acquisitions team to ensure that not every deal and opportunity hits my desk. Otherwise, I feel like a kid in the candy store and want to bid on every opportunity that I get, right? So that's the biggest challenge. The second challenge is as we scale, right, the level we want to scale, there's multiple routes. One is to build the relationships with a lot of passive investors or build the relationships with a lot of family offices and private equity firms. And both have their pros and cons. So we're exploring which direction to really put our focus and our effort and our team structure and expand our team from a business development standpoint of partners that could bring in that inflow of capital and relationships. So that's going to be, I wouldn't consider any of these challenges, but more opportunities as I would rephrase them. But those are the two big things that I'm looking at right now.
For, you know, that's, you know, we talked about deals and kind of how you're looking at deals and acquisitions. And then, you know, you just mentioned the dollar component of this, you know, how you attract equity, whether that's from, you know, 50 to 100 a pop for accredited investors that are kind of small time, or go focus on kind of the small to medium sized family offices.
Yeah.
Could you give our audience a little, you know, pros and cons between small versus, you know, a small investor versus like a family office?
Yeah, absolutely. So the small accredited investors, right? You really, for them, beyond your friends and family, if you're looking to build a network of those investors who not only understand and and are aware of your brand, but actually trust your investment philosophy and your track record, that takes its own sweet time, right? And that takes its own investment in thought leadership, conversations like these, having the right website, and newsletters, and other elements in conversations, a lot of phone calls to go beyond your network. So far we've been blessed with, just 2 decades of consulting and financial background allows us to say to a lot of our network and friends and family and pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm investing 50,000 in my own deal. Would you like to do that? And 30 people would come in and we've been fine. But when we are looking at the scale, we are looking at this additional capital means reaching out to people that might not know us before this conversation. So that the pro is you have a lot of them, right? A lot of people right now are looking to park their capital that they might have earned from the stock market or otherwise, and really looking to diversify their portfolio in the coming months. The con is for you to establish yourself as a thought leader, there's a lot of investment and effort that needs to be done beyond just identifying opportunities and executing on opportunities. So on the flip side, family office, a typical family office could write you a $5 million check.
Yep.
By itself, right? So you need to talk to one person and one programmatic relationship, and once the track record and partnership is established, you can scale as much as quickly as you'd like. The biggest con is if they don't like a deal, or once you are into a deal 30, 60 days, now you put in your own investment dollars into the line and something happens and it falls through, you don't have any other options. Versus on the passive investor side, you have 50 people right now investing with you. Two people at the last minute might decide to not invest with you. Finding two people with $50,000 is much easier than finding one person that can write a $5 million check. So there's those two philosophies. So it's not an either or strategy, and it cannot be mutually exclusive. But again, with the limited amount of time any one of us has in terms of actually doing and executing on opportunities, amongst other things, and keeping a work-life balance, where do you truly focus on is the question.
Hemal, do you find as you're having these conversations with potential investors, whether it be, private placement or family offices,
Mm-hmm.
is there a demand or an appetite for your investment philosophy, for chasing these distressed assets, kind of going against the grain, if you will? Do you find that there's a appetite out there?
Yeah, absolutely. And once people who've invested with us so far don't want to invest in conventional deals anymore, because they're like, why would I wait 10 years to earn 3 times my return if when I'm getting in 2 years my money back and I'm getting equity in the deal for the next 20 years, right? So our model of investment is pretty unique that we've created, at least on the multifamily side. Plus, Carolinas being such a hot market, again, allows us to say, hey, even in Charlotte, if you're buying a large portfolio, for example, us being here as boots on the ground and knowing our submarket, knowing our assets, allows that level of confidence for the investors to work with us.
Yeah. And what feedback would you have for the general audience who may be hearing this message out there right now about given where we're at in this economic cycle, there's a lot of uncertainty still of where we're going to go. We got an election year, post-COVID, all this stuff. I think the general sentiment that you probably most frequently hear is chasing, the stabilized asset, right? Chasing the Fannie Freddie qualified debt. And what feedback would you have? Again, your strategy is contradictory to that. What feedback would you give to those who maybe be considering, adopting this similar philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, chasing with the right value proposition, a stabilized asset is perfectly fine. But if you're buying an asset that is distressed at a significant discount right now, let's say 60 cents on the dollar, to me, the purchase price and all the other metrics, and I don't know whether your audience knows about debt service ratio, for example, right? What ratio the banks would lend you money at. We buy our distressed assets. The minimum the bank would lend you at is 1.2 times whatever your income is. We buy things at twice or 2x or 2.2x. So we just get such a deeply discounted asset that is currently cash flowing 10+% and can provide the returns, and go in and really look into developing the community and build the occupancy on those assets. So from my perspective, and again, the other thing we do is we do not charge any fees. So most of the conventional syndications and group investments have asset management fees and acquisitions fees and other fees that essentially is, run like a hedge fund, which is perfectly fine, right? For a retail asset, you need to have that model. We bet that unless we stabilize the asset and provide you the capital back plus double-digit return, we would not earn a dime. So we essentially are betting to work for free for the first couple of years while we stabilize the asset. So putting that on the line to really, that attracts a lot of investors thinking, okay, we are all synchronized from a partnership standpoint. We are all looking to make sure that as investors, they are earning their significant returns first before we truly earn any capital from an active management standpoint.
Yeah, it's really attractive to investors. I mean, it's aligned incentives.
Yes.
It's a beautiful thing, and versus a 2 for 20 model or something like that,
Exactly.
where you're just taking a rake of the deal on day one.
Exactly. And that's the right model for the right asset, right? So if we find a Charlotte asset right now that's more retail priced or at a slight discount because of our relationship, and we didn't have to go with 50 other bidders, and we found it at a decent price range and it's stabilized, we'd probably employ that model too, right? So again, it's the flexibility of what works with what asset class and what attracts what investors, and allows us to spread the risk portfolio, the return portfolio accordingly.
Yeah. I think to sum up, the conversation, I think it's important for people to understand that there's so many different ways to approach this investment vehicle and this strategy, right? I mean, there is an investor appetite for any and every type of strategy out there. I think it's just a matter of positioning yourself and finding the right investors that have that right alignment of interest, partnering with the right partners that have the experience, and just continuing to educate yourself, but continuing to put the systems in place to allow you to do that. And I love this, man. Again, it's the world of multifamily investing. I feel has become. It feels like it's become so mainstream. Excuse me. And we talk about that a lot. But you're hearing from all the industry leaders about just the one strategy, right? The value add strategy, but I like the contradictory philosophy in that look, going against the grain, looking at what others are afraid to touch right now, and really, I mean, there's not too many people I've talked to this year that have scaled the way you have. I mean, so and having the success that you're having, even despite this pandemic. So, man, great job, kudos. Really appreciate you sharing that insight, and I hope the listeners kind of open their minds a little bit to a new perspective. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
So as we kind of pivot here, I know Cody used the word system. You've used the word system a lot, which is fantastic. As we put structure around the business and processes in place, what are some of the systems that you're using?
Yeah, so systems in my mind don't mean tools. For our website, and we use the Active Campaign and Google Calendars and the usual stuff from what people look at. What from me, system means beginning with an end in mind, and really putting in the structure and rigor in terms of accountability between each of the partners, their work, trust, and then a set of aligned prerequisites that they need to work on that allows us all to be, as an entity, be streamlined, if you know what I mean, right? So everybody in my partnership model, even though I'm the founder, and within my company and in future all the employees, they A, they need to be high performers, and B, and having that structure and rigor. And it's up to me to define and help them define how to evolve, how to put structure on the work they're doing, and how to perform their work. Because to me, input doesn't matter. It's all about output, right? It doesn't matter coming from the corporate world. There could be people who might be sitting at their desk for 10 hours and producing 4 hours of work, right? As long as you're providing that output, and if there's something wrong, so for example, a recent deal that we looked at the numbers, we ran it through our calculators. Again, it was an against the grain type of deal in a light tech asset, which is a low income housing tax credit. So different level of competency required. And so when we started bidding on it, when we looked at the whole process, there were a lot of kinks in that process that we had to walk away from and said, okay, let's take a pause as a team. Let's connect. Let's sit down as a team, meet in person. People traveling from all across to meet in person and really spend time as a team to say what could be different here. How do we evolve from here for the next phase? How do we structure? What sort of legal documentation? What sort of conversations we should be having? And how do we make sure that we as a group become much more refined in our next deal? That to me is the systematizing of deals and opportunities and conversations.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, certainly beyond tools. So you've got, I guess a standard operating procedure in place, but you've also got the adaptability as well to come back and kind of revisit so you can adapt those SOPs and improve on the next go.
Yes, coming from a consulting background, I cannot make any large decisions without a spreadsheet and pros and cons listed against that. That's just a blessing and a curse.
Well, it's such an
Yeah,
important
right.
aspect of the business. And I think it's something that, I definitely would love to spend another podcast episode just discussing is, we talk so much about the deals and the investment strategies and all that stuff. But, there's not a lot of talk about, hey, what's the business side of this? Like you said, what does the infrastructure look like? What are the pieces that you need in place to really make this a very organized business? Because that's what it is, right? It's a business. We use real estate as the vehicle, but it's really growing that business. So that's a great topic. I'd love to come back and we'll have to, plan to talk about that at another time. But
Absolutely. Happy to provide value there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, Hemal, man, it's been a great conversation. Unfortunately, we're getting near the end of our time here, but man, I appreciate all of the knowledge you've shared and the wisdom you shared. I just, very impressed by your growth this year. But before we head out, man, I got a couple of questions for you, and then we'll wrap everything up. So, one thing that we do like to get from everybody is what are you doing for your continued education to further your investing?
Yes, I always have two mentors that I at least subscribe to till I feel like that I'm learned enough, and then I move on to a new mentor. So I invest a lot personally from that perspective in mentorship and masterminds, and then I read a lot of books. And the third thing is I keep myself sane through just taking breaks and meditation. Because you're changing so many gears as you're preaching to the choir here, and you're thinking about your side hustle, your jobs, your work-life balance, kids, Zoom calls. It's important to ground yourself and understand where you're coming from and where you're going.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. You got to take care of yourself throughout this journey for sure. So, what have been some of the lasting lessons that you've kind of learned throughout your journey so far?
You got to vet the people out, and even though I come from a background that's all I did, sit in front of new teams and new management and new clients and understand where they're coming from, their pressures, their backgrounds, etc. You still can have different types of people that you might not want to align to. So that's one, and then trust your gut instinct, man. Once you start listening to that, red flags that you're getting, there's so many opportunities and so many ways to do business and scale your business, and your credibility is so important, especially in this day and age where one Facebook post can screw that up, right? So you want to be careful and cautious, even though you want to be aggressive every day in terms of what you're trying to achieve, but be very patient in the macro and be cautious with who you're working with, and then are they aligned to your values and your ethics and the culture that you're trying to create.
Yeah, I love that. It's again such an important aspect of the business. You know, this is a marriage when you get into these partnerships, and you got to make sure you're with the right people. So, but what advice would you give to the listeners to help further their growth in their businesses?
Take action. I don't get overwhelmed and don't try and attend every meetup, every piece of information that you read, every Facebook post about some sort of deal. Just pick a lane, get better at that lane, pick a mentor, pick a coach, find a friend who has a little more competency than you, whatever it needs to be done. And if you're a passive investor, unless you invest into one deal, you would not know how this model works. And once you invest in a good deal, I guarantee you would not go anywhere else but build wealth through this strategy, because it's such an amazing use of your time and effort, and the wealth creation at the end is just exponential.
Fantastic advice, man. Really appreciate that. So, all right, Hemal, tell the listeners how they can get connected with you, learn more about you, and experiential equity. Excuse me. Exponential equity. Excuse me.
Yeah, so you can connect me two ways. One is my cell phone, 980-254-5692. And or you can email me at Hemal, Hemal at exponential-equity.com.
Awesome. Great conversation, Hemal. Look forward to the next one, buddy.
Excellent. Thank you again for having me. I'm truly honored.
Thank you.
Thank you.